So here we are on the second to last day of our excavation of Butts Brow, and I'm still sitting in the same feature that I was, I think, 3 weeks ago. But what we've actually found is by being extremely careful with how we excavate this and taking time to think about the processes that have made it, we really think we've got a good story coming about because of it. And this is, it's actually quite a large oval Neolithic pit, which is forming sort of one of these breaks that runs around the hill, this ring of ditches. And behind me is a causeway or entrance, and in front of me as well another causeway. So this should be quite a significant point in the monument. It's where two entrances seem to be, and it's where in 2017 we found the polishing stone, a piece of sandstone which looks like it was used for polishing axes to give them that wonderful finish. So this year we've excavated this area, and as I say, it's been quite complicated, but what we now can say is that it is indeed a Neolithic pit. We found some pottery in the fill of the bank of the ditch here, and a huge amount of struck splint flakes. So again, this is pointing to one of the main reasons that this monument is here, is people are making tools. Maybe not one of the main reasons, but one of the things people are doing here is making tools. We're not finding lots of domestic debris at all. There's been no organic matter, no bones, very little bit of pottery in this part. So I think flint is the king around here. But what's really nice with this feature, quite unexpectedly, just a couple of days ago, we uncovered, if you can see in front of me, there's a circular or slightly oval pit. When we first found it, we weren't sure whether it would be a pit containing maybe deposits or it's a post hole, but now I'm pretty certain that it is a post hole. As you can see, in the bottom are some flints here, and at the moment I'm happy that those are natural flints that do run in seams through this site, and then packed around it were these larger flints coming up through the fields, and then in the centre I believe there would have been a post. So you might ask, why on earth would you put a post in the middle of a pit? But if this area is important, you might want a post or something like that. I mean, I don't really use the term often because it comes up other images, but a totem pole type thing, something to sort of say what's going on here and show how important it is. Could have just been a plain wooden post. But that, I think, is going on here, and just possibly, if I just shift over, there are a couple of other holes here that we found before in this part of the ditch. We've often interpreted them as solution hollows, just natural features in the chalk, but there's always been this bit of doubt in the back of our minds, because some of them are very circular, and also how does that form? So at the moment I think that these possibly may have been utilised for small stakes or small posts, or that actually there's some flint extraction has gone on, so a big piece of flint has been taken out, and that's actually left a weakness in the chalk which water and things like that has got into and exploited it. But we are recording all of these very carefully. The other thing that we found, shows how much you can get out of one small section, is that we understand now the process by which these pits and ditches have been filled and then cut into. We don't understand why, but this one appears to have at least 2 changes in its time. This chalky layer you can see on both sides seems to have been a deliberate backfill, and that was over some weathered clay. So it's been filled in, and then at some point later on someone has then come along and they've recut the ditch, so they've actually cut back into it for some reason, and that's when I think this post hole has been put in here as well. So it shows that over time this monument has gone through periods where it may be not have been used, or maybe not as important, or maybe the idea of the ditch is only used very infrequently. But then they come back and they repurpose it, or sort of design what they've got here. The thing we've got to work out is why they're doing that.
Right, well I'm standing in a Second World War Canadian Army slit trench, which was dug here in about January-February 1942. This was part of a wider defensive strategy by the Canadian Army to dig in an entire battalion of about 700 or 800 men onto the chalk downland here at Butts Brow. The trench was for 2 men, So they would have been firing their weapons probably in this direction. And this is part of an all-round defensive position, so there are other slit trenches around us facing outwards. We know it's a slit trench because archive documents tell us the Canadians were here. The size of it conforms to the training manual of the time, so 2 foot 3 inches wide, 6 foot long and about 4 feet deep, and we get this from the Canadian archive documents. This would have been back-breaking work. I mean, we had enough trouble just digging out the loose rubble from it, but going down through solid, virgin, undisturbed chalk, just with human muscle, pick and shovel, it's going to take a while. You've also got the problem of you have to take the spoil away because the chalk is going to show up for enemy aircraft flying overhead, so you have to do that for camouflage reasons. I've calculated you probably get about 3 tons of material out of just this one trench. When you consider that we've probably got 100 or more of these trenches around this particular area, that's an awful lot of material being taken out, and it has to go somewhere. So it was probably dumped in sandbags inside a quarry elsewhere in a non-vital part of the Downs. Several reasons. Firstly, they'd changed their coastal defensive strategy, so instead of stringing your troops all out along the coast where the Germans could just break through the line and negate half of your manpower, they decided to pull them up onto the Downs here overlooking Eastbourne, because this was a vital piece of ground. On this ground you could land aircraft, you can drop paratroops, you can avoid taking your tanks through the town of Eastbourne, which would be quite hazardous for armoured vehicles. So if you get up onto the Downs here, you could circumvent Eastbourne and the defences there, get onto the main roads and then up to London and other strategic objectives.
Okay, so we've got the ditch here, so what I'm going to be doing is taking some samples to do geoarchaeological analysis. So that's really looking at the soils and sediments that make up the fill of the ditch. So I'll be taking samples all the way through the ditch to kind of look at the changes in a little bit more detail. I'm also hopefully going to take some samples in the fill, so it's kept in situ, which will be set in resin, and then I'll look at that under a microscope to try and look at kind of some of the formation processes in a bit more detail, how the fill was put in there, whether it was intentionally placed or whether it's washed into the ditch. And also potentially I'll be looking at that in the bank as well to see if there's any buried soils that might tell us a little bit about how the environment's changed, how it compares to the soils that are here now. So that's kind of what I'll be doing to kind of look at it in a bit more detail.
We're looking at the bank, which is associated with the ditch down there. Basically going through it, trying to find date and evidence. Some pottery's come up, which is believed to be Neolithic, and just a case of trawling through it slowly because it's quite difficult to spot in the type of soil that's there.